the number one most underrated bass fishing lure that we're probably all not using enough is what we're talking about in today's Monster Bass video. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Monster Bass channel. My name is Jeremy. I run a page and channel called Fishing Lonestar. So whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, would love for you to come visit me there. Give me a follow, like, subscribe, etc. Whatever it is that you do on that platform, come do it. We'd love to see you there. Today's video, we're talking about one of the most underrated bass fishing lures that you probably have and you've probably even used, but at least for myself, I found myself probably not using this lure enough. And I just got back from a trip to Lake Okeechobee. I go there almost annually around the February-March time frame just to go have a blast fishing that lake because I absolutely love it. And I'm always reminded of one particular lure that is heavily used there that quite honestly we probably should be using all over the country, especially around grass and timber, maybe even rocks. I don't know, there's probably better lures for rocks, but especially around grass and timber, and that is the speed worm. All right, now whether that be a speed worm, a swimming worm is probably a general term, or in this particular case, the cutter worm by Rage Tail or Strike King. I believe it's one of the most underutilized bass fishing lures and probably one of the most underrated lures that we have at our disposal that we're probably not using enough. So in today's video, I'm gonna talk about a little bit of how to rig this for better hookup ratios, right? We're gonna get into rigging, we're gonna get into the retrieval, we're gonna get into the hook set, and we're also gonna cover color and sizes. We'll go through them pretty quickly, but all these tips and tricks are gonna help you fish better with the cutter worm, swimming worm, speed worm, whatever you like to call it. All right, so let's start with some colors, all right? I've got with me 3 different colors. The first one is a Tequila Sunrise, and that actually has some orange flake in it as well. So Tequila Sunrise Orange Flake, that's a great color. The next one is a Blue Crawl Red Flake. And this is actually the one I have tied on. I'll show you that one in just a second. And then the last is a Black and Blue Swirl, and I'll show you this one in a different size in a minute. All 3 of these are in the 6-inch version, all right? And very quickly, let's talk about how I use each one of them. So first and foremost, if I'm fishing a high sun day, so a very sunny day, not many clouds, and a relatively clear body of water, I'm gonna use that Blue Crawl Red Flake. All right, it's almost like a green pumpkin red flake or just a watermelon red flake, but the Blue Crawl just kind of gives you a little bit of color variation, and that red flake really stands out on a sunny day and really helps draw fish in. Something about that red flake, fish just love it. Trust me, I don't know what it is, but they love it. Speaking of flake, all right, this is the Tequila Sunrise and has an orange flake in it. I like this for kind of those partly cloudy days, and Tequila Sunrise usually seems to work earlier in the morning, later in the evening, and sometimes just, I don't know, there's just something about this color that seems to really get bass to bite in kind of some low visibility situations. But if we're going like muddier water or you know, like a foot, maybe 2 foot visibility somewhere in there, black and blue is hard to beat. The silhouette or the presence of black and blue really stands out. And I'll show you this 6-inch compared to the 7-inch for a size comparison. So here you can see this is the exact same color, black, blue swirl, and you can see 6 versus 7-inch. And even to the tail difference, there's a much bigger thump in the tail that you can see there, that Rage Tail that's added. So kind of depending upon where you're fishing and how aggressive your fish are. If they're pretty aggressive, feel free to step up to that 7-inch. I'm telling you, even the little fish will eat it. I probably caught one of the smallest fish in Lake Okeechobee last weekend on a 7-inch worm just like this. So the little fish will eat it. So don't be afraid to step up to the 7-inch. But depending upon the pressure and how active your fish are, you might want to just stick with the 6-inch, but you've got both size options there at your disposal. All right, now before we get into the full details of kind of the hook and rigging techniques I like to use, I just want to talk a minute about this particular worm, all right? So this is the cutter worm, and this tail here gives a great swimming action in the water. It really kicks. There's a great swimming motion, and it really looks like a bluegill or any other type of bait fish, the tail kicking and swimming in the water. So I will say Rage Tail Strike King did a great job on the end of that, giving it some good thump in the water, and it looks great. One of the ways I like to rig this, you usually have two different styles of hooks, right? So first one is a round bend worm hook or an EWG hook. So let me grab them off my boat and I'll show you those differences. All right, so first we have a round bend offset worm hook. Now I kind of prefer this one, and I'll tell you why in just a second, but you can also throw the EWG hook as well. These are both a 4/0 in size. Both of them have a little bit of a ridge right here to help your bait stay up on the lure. But one of the reasons that I like the round bend worm hook is you see how if I drew a straight line down from the shank, it would come down towards the middle of the bend, not over here. So what that means is I'm gonna rig my worm in a minute to come down this way at this angle, and it allows for what I believe a little bit better hook penetration. However, depending upon how heavy vegetation you're fishing, an EWG is really good too, because you can also text pose this, meaning you can bury that hook tip and your worm is rigged straight perpendicular. So some people like to rig it on EWG, some people like to rig it on a round bend worm hook. My personal preference is the worm hook, but by all means, the EWG hook works just as well. So let me show you how I rig it, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right, so I've got my worm, and for those of you that are used to a Texas rig and how to do it, it's pretty simple. I will say though, the distance from this bend to the top of the hook is always how far I put my hook into the worm, about that far, all right? So once I put it that far, I'm just gonna come out, you see to there, I'm gonna push that all the way up here to the tip, and when I get to the top right here, I'm gonna hold the plastic, instead of my hand this way, I'm gonna turn it this way, and I'm gonna turn until that plastic slides right up there, okay? So now we're left with this. Now for this part, I'm gonna put my thumb down here on the bottom. Let me move this weight out of the way. Okay, I'm basically gonna measure where that hook is gonna go into the worm. So I'm gonna put my index finger and my thumb right there. I'm gonna bend it 90 degrees. Now, instead of pushing it all the way through like I would on a EWG hook, I'm gonna push it almost out, but to where that hook is still sitting right in the thick of that plastic, okay? Now, here's why I like the round bend worm hook better, is there's a little bit of an angle here. So when a fish bites, right, and their mouth comes down over this, you can see it's creating a pressure point right there where that hook is going to come out and expose. So what that means is when you're fishing and you get a bite, all you have to do is kind of sweep and lean and reel into them. You don't have to just give them a hard jacking hook set, because the way this worm is angled on this hook, the hook is going to stick out just like that and penetrate the fish's mouth. So I just believe I get a tad better hookup ratio on an on a round bend worm hook than I do on an EWG hook. That's just my personal preference. Both work great. Now, in terms of the Texas rigging portion to finish it off, I normally add a peg, a bait peg or a bobber stopper, and then I add my Monster Bass tungsten. This is the 1/4 ounce, 1/4 or 3/8, depending upon, again, how deep you're fishing and what your vegetation looks like. The great thing about this setup right here is you can fish it from the bank, kayak, a boat, etc., and it's pretty darn weedless. So that's what I really like about it, especially if you're fishing from a bank. You're gonna be able to get this lure back almost every time. All right, so let's talk about really quickly the equipment that I'm using. I'll just say my personal preference. You can make modifications however you like, but I like to use a relatively higher speed reel. Now this is an 8.3 to 1. I don't necessarily think you have to go that fast. Somewhere around a 7.3 to 1 or a 7.5 to 1 works really well. In this particular case, I use an 8.3 to 1. This is the Lewis Hypermag. I really like this reel because it is super light. Now, the Lewis Hypermag is on the higher end of the spectrum of reels, but it is incredibly light. And for covering a lot of ground, making a lot of casts, I really like the lighter reel, okay? But you're more looking for a gear ratio, in my opinion. It's just a personal preference that I also like the lightness of the Hypermag. I'm throwing this on, in my particular case, a TFO. I use a heavy rod. Depending upon how parabolic your rod is, you could use a medium heavy. But I use a heavy 7.3 fast action. You can use a 7.3 medium heavy fast action, a 7-foot medium heavy fast action, somewhere in that range. And I would say between 15 to 20 pound fluorocarbon. We fish in Texas around a lot of thick timber, and in that particular case, the thicker fluorocarbon does better. So this is 20 pound for me. I was on Okeechobee last week and we were using braided line just because of all the grass that's there. There's not much timber, but there's a lot of grass. So depending upon where you're fishing around grass, use more braid. If you're fishing on timber, use more fluorocarbon. But that's just my personal preference of what I'm using and the setup that I use. Now, let's talk about retrieval. All right, retrieval is super simple. When you're retrieving this, you're literally gonna retrieve it almost like a swim bait if you're swimming it. In this particular case, we'll talk about just a steady retrieve, but you're just gonna point it right at the lure and just have a steady retrieve back, all right? It is just a point. I would point right at it and steady retrieve. And you can slow it down or speed it up depending upon how fast you need to fish it. Some cases you can burn it across the top of the water if there's really thick vegetation, so you can reel it pretty quickly. If you're fishing deeper water, say 5 to 10 foot, you can slow it down, add 3/8 or even a ½ ounce weight and fish it deeper, fish that worm on the bottom. The other way that you can retrieve this lure is just like a normal Texas rig, okay? So yes, it's got that swimming tail on it or that paddle tail on it, but it works just as well if you're just dragging or hopping on the bottom, all right? So that's what I like is the versatility of this lure is at any point in time, I can slow it down, I can dead stick it, I can hop it, I can crawl it, drag it, in any slight little movement, that tail is still gonna give a good wiggle and movement in the water and create some attention that hopefully bass will come up and eat. And that's why I really like this particular lure. So that's it, guys. The most underrated lure that I personally think we're probably all not fishing enough is the swimming worm, speed worm, cutter worm, etc. Make sure you pick up a pack. Make sure you subscribe right here to the Monster Bass channel. And if you disagree with me, it's okay. Leave me a comment and let me know if you fish this a lot, if you don't fish it very much, if you like to fish it more, or if you think there's maybe another lure that's more underrated than this one. Let me know in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And again, my name is Jeremy with Fishing Lonestar. This is the Monster Bass channel. We're all here to help you fish better.